The Duskbloods just got announced, and it's basically a spiritual successor to Bloodborne, aka kind of Bloodborne 2, but multiplayer. So welcome to me delving into every single frame of the trailer. So we immediately start with this guy in a chair. He is still breathing though, we immediately start off in a very gothic setting with this guy in a chair. He's breathing, he's not dead, but there is someone who's collapsed next to him. This woman appears to have some kind of vampiric trait or gene. In her voiceover, she says, "I give you my blood, I give you my life, turn a wheel and transport him to a night of moonlight to humanity's very dusk." So it sounds like this is going to be the preamble for us playing Duskbloods and our character. We are going to be given blood, obviously, by this woman. I would assume she's a vampire of some kind because blood seems to be important to the game, Duskbloods. And with her blood, we're presumably going to survive all of the deaths we'll encounter because it is a FromSoftware game after all. Obvious symbolism of her being a red blood connected, very beautiful embroidery, probably of the upper class. There are some later scenes in this trailer of characters who look like they are of religious clergy or in the upper class with very ornate robes. So I'd assume she's part of that class as well. But whatever it is, it seems like we were given her blood in a rather dire state. Whoever this is sitting in the chair, I assume the player character, we don't look like we're really in a fit state to fight anything. So it could be that her giving us her blood is her last act before she passes away. She also bequeaths us with this sigil here in our hand. Gonna assume this is the Duskbloods logo of some kind, might make its way into the HUD of the game. It looks like a sun that's surrounded by, I don't know, a compass or something, potentially. We're going to see a lot of symbology and iconography around religious blood cults or a blood religion. Again, this is very similar tonally to Bloodborne. So it's basically Bloodborne 2, but they won't say that now, will they? No. And when she says turn the wheel, I guess we can assume that this is the wheel that will be turned. I doubt she's putting it on our hand just to remind us, but this is evidently going to be a symbol of Duskbloods and the task we've been tasked with for the entire game. Another thing I noticed about this fellow here, I have brought out my pop shield because my own voice was irritating me. It looks like we've been down on the drink. Right here. We've ingested something. It might be alcohol. It might be laudanum. It might be something to commit before whatever happens with the moon happens. Either way, it doesn't look like we're in a good state. So we might have been one of the wretches who was trying to avoid what's going to happen with the moon, but whoever this was had other plans. So this is the moment where me, along with a lot of other people, thought this was going to be Bloodborne 2. This is the classic Gothic style of Bloodborne. Straight away, you can see that there are very obviously two sides to the city that we're in. There is the grandiose Gothic architecture and Big Ben lookalike, and then right here down in the bottom we have what looks kind of a bit more like a shantytown lit by candles. Interestingly, we're going to come back to an environment that looks very similar to this later in the trailer, where a guy or a gal or non-binary babe in really heavy armor is going to make an appearance. So that could be from down here, but he does look like he's underground, so maybe not. This indicates that Duskbloods is going to be in some kind of industrial revolution, steampunk phase. This does look markedly more futuristic than Bloodborne already, hence a lot of people thinking, including me, it was Bloodborne 2, so no judgment. And here we have the blood religion that I mentioned right at the beginning of the video. You can see here, this looks like, I'm going to assume this is the central figure of the religion mythos, catching blood from something, potentially the moon up here, in a chalice. So we're going to assume that the vampirism in Duskbloods is religiously sanctified or justified in that way. It might be that the higher members of the clergy and the upper classes in Duskbloods are the ones who are able to drink blood and become vampires. Up here we have the moon, and it looks like the moon is the source of the blood that's going down to this fella here. And now the moon is mentioned later on in the Duskbloods trailer, notably... Now the moon is mentioned later on in the Duskbloods trailer, notably... Whoever's narrating this says that, "Close your eyes and contemplate the moon as befits the scene to the past. I pray that you are able, carrier of peace. For the moon tears will flow from one and one alone." So we can safely assume that the tears that are flowing from the moon are in fact blood of some kind. Or red liquid. I guess we don't know for sure that it's blood, but vampires' blood, there's going to be a scene later on of a guy drinking blood from an enemy from their neck, so... if it's not blood, then I'm just going to put allegedly in here. Okay, this is our first glimpse of one of the player characters. I'm sure this is a player character because later on in the trailer, we see them executing a number of moves, like jumping, shooting their gun, which kind of looks like an Uzi, to be completely honest. But this gives us an early indication as to the weapons that are going to be available in Duskbloods. We have the sword, classic FromSoft melee combat, and then back here we have a gun. Again, another reason that people thought this was going to be Bloodborne 2, because Bloodborne does of course have guns. This is just kind of fashion souls, honestly, at this point, but confirmation that melee and ranged attacks are going to be in the game in the form of the steampunk theme that Duskbloods is going for. Here he is, looking over the city that we're going to be exploring. This is the church we saw earlier. Again, this is the bridge, I think, from that little screen we saw earlier as well. Down here, you can see that shanty town from, again, earlier. I'm going to assume that this might be kind of Blighttown themed. But as Duskbloods is going to be a multiplayer game, I don't think this map is going to be as big as we are used to in FromSoft games. I think the best indication we can get about what Duskbloods is going to be like is by playing Elden Ring Night Rain, which is going to be coming out later this year. But from here we can still see there is tons to explore. We have the Cathedral area, like I said before, the kind of shack under the bridge area, which you're going to assume is a bit more rough and ready than the city, which is up here with cobbled streets and whatnot. And then back here we have a more countryside area, mountains and rich rolling plains, although they're not rolling actually, they're very jagged. Lots of space for us and our friends, or enemies as it may turn out to be, to explore and hopefully survive, but more likely probably die. This is one of those people I mentioned earlier. Now, evidently in the world of Duskbloods, something has already gone terribly wrong, as this is, I think, the third broken window we've seen in the trailer so far. Earlier, we saw that the moon window was smashed, and again, here something evidently has gone pretty seriously wrong for such a beautiful window to be smashed, and the sun is rising. Now, as this is a game all about vampires, I'm just going to stick with that for now. I can retcon that later. I'm going to assume that the wheel that's turning is maybe time. Perhaps in this world we're going to be fighting in the exclusive time period of dusk so that we don't turn to ash or something similar, which would explain potentially why this person is looking out over sunset or sunrise. They might be one of the vampire brethren coming to terms with the fact they're about to be ash and that time is going to be reset once again. I'm pretty sure this guy is a big deal because not only does he have a very fancy walking cane sword, I'm going to assume, but the embroidery on his jacket is exquisite. So going to assume this isn't a player character and instead this is an NPC of some kind. Okay, here we have another player character. This lad pops up later on as well, which is how I know they're a player character, in this very fetching leather Catwoman onesie. Once again, we have a sword, and this looks more like a dueling pistol, indicating that this is going to be one of the weapon types in the game. This is a very different area from the Gothic city we saw earlier. It is, obviously, a church with a graveyard with a very perilous rock bridge here. Again, just one of the many different areas we're going to be exploring. There's not much more to take away from the screenshot, other than perhaps the area that Duskbloods is going to take place in is going to be an island or a peninsula of some kind. There are some very clear, sheer cliff faces here, so we're definitely going to be hemmed in. This isn't going to be an open world exploration. I think it's probably going to be open world in the same way that I guess Fortnite is technically open world, but you're still constrained to the same area. Here we have another incredible character. I am fairly sure this is an NPC, and the only reason I say that is because I can't see any of her weapons. She could be a mage, however, which would mean she might not have any weapons equipped, but she looks stunning, obviously. This is Sewers. Gotta have Sewers in a FromSoft game. There's not much more to say about this screen than that, really, if I'm being perfectly honest, so let's move on. Except Slay. Okay, underground. Again, this looks like it might be an enemy as opposed to a player character. I say that because it looks like they have one single very large weapon here, and this is a FromSoft enemy pose through and through. I can just imagine seeing this silhouetted against the light and having that pit in my stomach knowing I'm about to fight this. They look like some kind of ogre or oni from Japanese folklore with these big horns and teeth coming out, as well as how they're dressed, to be perfectly honest. Interestingly, for the world building, it looks like the underground areas of wherever Duskblood takes place are important to the religion, because there are multiple angels carved here out of the stalagmites in the underground, which is just a cool detail. Here's the big boy. As you can see, they are in a very thick armor plating. This is a player character. I am fairly sure about that. I'm pretty sure this is their melee weapon. It looks like the kind of thing that you would hold over your shoulder, like it's a great hammer potentially, and I can't see what end the gun would come out of. This looks more like a cattle prod, but I might have got that completely mixed up. However it is, this is almost certainly the heavy armor type player archetype. Do you remember before I said that the floating candles might come back later on? This looks to be the floating candles from this screen all the way back here. However, I'm not entirely sure of that, because if you look in the background of this scene, we don't see any iron railings, so this might be somewhere completely different. However, we do have a waterfall and sheer rock face, so this is likely not underground, but overground somewhere. Again, not much more to take away from the screen apart from that. But in the next screen, this guy has a jetpack. Love that. Now, the entire way the world of Duskbloods is built looks to be incredibly vertical, so we're going to see some jumps later on. This guy has a jetpack, so you can jump very quickly from one area of the map to the other, bypassing having to go through all of this on foot. This is really interesting. I know that obviously in Elden Ring you had Torrent, which got you from place A to B very quickly, but it's been a long time since I've seen this kind of verticality, which is such a video game term, in a FromSoft game. So I'm really interested to see how this will play out. You've got to imagine there'll be tons of aerial attacks in Duskbloods and ways to take advantage of being high up in the air when the things you want to turn into squishy red jam are far down below you. This is, from the screenshot earlier, this is the area I picked out earlier. See, these are the iron railings. This is the pool that has the floating candles on it. So we are seeing this from a different angle. If I scroll back, we can actually surmise that the dude is probably somewhere around here jumping down. Again, important to note, this is evidently overcast. I guess you could say it might not technically be night. This looks like it might be sunlight coming through. Whereas when we get to this bit, this looks like it's more in daytime. So it might be that the day-night cycle isn't a day-night cycle perchance, but maybe a day cycle. And the idea is that you're going to try and do as much as you can before night falls and enemies get a ton stronger. Because if they're vampires, it would be in keeping with the theme that nighttime is way more dangerous. Interestingly, it does look like there is a boost function for the jetpack. Just look at this bit here. See, he zips off super quickly. So I think we can safely assume that aerial travel is going to be a big part of Duskbloods. Otherwise, it can't just be a simple jumping from one A to B. Otherwise, what would be the point of having kind of like a nitro thrust? I don't know if that's the correct term for it, but you get what I'm trying to say here. Here, again, we have the same city from earlier, but the sky is looking mighty funky and weird. So I'm going to assume that as the time cycle, I guess is the more accurate thing to call it, advances throughout the game, the appearance of the city is going to change. Probably adding some deadlier environmental effects, if this is anything to go by, because I don't know about you, but if I saw this in the sky, I would not be particularly happy or confident that my life was going to continue for much longer. Here we have what I assume is a mage character. You can see they're holding something here, an orb of some kind, and they are evidently in the sky, as well as dressed just incredibly. But we have a jump scare from the moon from Majora's Mask. Now, earlier in the video, I did mention that the moon was mentioned from the person doing the voiceover for the Duskbloods trailer, and also in the stained glass. The moon seems to have special significance. Can't help but think it looks vaguely angelic here with all of these wings. This might be, in some sense, the final boss of Duskbloods. If we're going to assume that the blood came from the moon, it could be that, I don't know, it's fulfilling some kind of awful pledge coming back. I mean, this doesn't look like it's going to be anything good, let's be completely honest. Its wings are moving, if you look at the wings while this scene plays. You can see that they're very faintly moving back and forth, so I do believe that this is some kind of enemy entity. It could be that, like in Majora's Mask, the cycle of Duskbloods ends when this collides with the world. That would be incredibly similar to Majora's Mask, though, so I'm not entirely sure about that. Either way, would not want to see this in my nightmares or in my waking world, because this is kind of terrifying, honestly. Here we have another figure who I'm going to assume is actually potentially a player character. They are dual wielding some pretty cool swords here, and it's the fact that they have a gun that makes me think they're a player character, because NPCs, from what we've seen so far, and granted that was all my assumption, haven't had both guns and melee weapons. The pose this person is doing here is reminiscent of Jesus on the cross, hence the religious overtones of Duskbloods. You can see here as well we have another bit of religious iconography. I'm going to assume that is maybe blood coming down from the mouth there. This might be the saint that first drank blood and became powerful or something like that. I can't be sure. If I'm being super meta about this, the fact that this fades out makes me think this could also be a cutscene introducing a mini-boss, because that would be very FromSoft, to be perfectly honest. And also, the design of this creature does look absolutely sick. So unless this is some kind of skin you can get for your player character, maybe I'll just admit that I was wrong 5 seconds ago or whatever and say this might actually be a mini-boss. It looks like they have bugs crawling out of their body, and evidently they seem to consider themselves some kind of religious icon, because this very obviously takes place in a cathedral of some kind. So I was wrong. I'm now going to say this is a mini-boss. Okay, in this bit here, we're going to see the jumps that I mentioned earlier. So jumping, clearing distances very quickly, going to be a big part of Duskbloods. A lot of verticality going on to get from one bit of the map to the other bit of the map. Interestingly, here we have a drawbridge. Now, this was the bridge we saw before, so this is a completely different one. This does not appear to have a drawbridge, but this might indicate that parts of the map will change as the time cycle goes on, making this bit inaccessible or accessible depending on what time of the day it is. I've just skipped back to this moment here. This is that drawbridge that we just saw opened, and this is the cathedral. I am going to assume that the most powerful enemy on the map is going to be in the cathedral, because, like, look at it. So it could be that this drawbridge lowers at the part in the cycle when you are supposed to be powerful enough to take on the boss, essentially locking you out of here when it's very early on in the cycle and you won't have the abilities to get to the church or survive. But then again, FromSoft isn't very handholdy when it comes to what bosses you encounter at what level, so this might simply be a time of day kind of thing, whereas in one run, you might not want to focus on whoever is in this cathedral, and you instead might want to beef up by farming mobs around here. In a later run, you might actually want to take on whoever the hell is in here and want to cross this bridge as soon as it becomes available. Now, this next scene here is what leads me to the vampire allegations. I mean, look at him go. That's drinking blood. That's deriving some kind of sustenance from whatever enemy that was. This looks like it might be something akin to collecting your souls, as in all the Soulsborne games. Whatever it is, this isn't him expelling this stuff. This stuff comes back into him after he drinks this blood. So look at this. Now, could it be that this was the enemy that killed our player character? And instead of just running around to get your souls back from a set area, you have to kill that enemy who killed you to get the souls back? Or maybe there's someone who keeps your souls and you have to drain their blood to get your souls back. Souls, of course, interchangeable term. I'm going to assume it can be blood or something later on. Either way, this is where the vampiric allegations are coming from. Another Gothic setting here. This is an elevator of some kind, evidently, and we're going to be going up, 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 or down, down, down. I think this is also indicating that at some point during the cycle, much like the drawbridge, this door is going to open and we're going to be able to access this elevator. So again, implications that the map in Duskbloods is going to change depending on the environment and what time it is in the cycle. Hate this. Absolutely hate this. Sewers. Can't have a FromSoft game without sewers, but whatever the hell this is, his teeth are honestly pretty well taken care of. This is probably going to be one of the mini-bosses in the sewer area. I'm assuming these are great big sacks that are going to be inflated and crap is going to be thrown at you from this giant maw. Interestingly, this is only one of the very few enemies we've seen in Duskbloods so far. Also, it appears to have like multiple, like 6 legs or something. Oh my god, and multiple sets of teeth. Gross, I love it. Underground is going to be important. That's it. That's all I can discern from this. I mean, it's focused on this, which looks very suggestive, honestly. There might be something up here, we never know. But this is important for some kind of thing. Maybe this is a boss arena, maybe this is an area you need to get to progress to a different area. I'm not entirely sure, but I can't see any enemies here or any carvings of angels or whatnot. So watch this space, I guess. Here he is. This is the player character that we saw earlier on heading towards the church. This person here looks like a mini-boss. It doesn't look like it's the same one from earlier who was underneath the saint of some kind, but this is definitely the player character we saw earlier. They're about to draw their sword. Very, very long sword, and that is the same dueling pistol we saw before. Now, what's happening here? This looks like it might be a summon, but we do know Duskbloods is going to be a multiplayer game, so let's watch that moment again. This motion that the player character does looks like some kind of summon, but there's nothing to distinguish this character here as being a summon. In Elden Ring, they were in black and white, and unlike an invader, they're not red. So I'm going to assume this is one of the co-op players in the game, and they're going to help you take on this mini-boss. It's unsure at this point whether you're going to be able to summon friends only when you are taking on bosses. That is what this scene appears to be implying, because we haven't seen co-op action anywhere outside of what is obviously a mini-boss theatre. Yeah, this is evidently a teaming up scenario here that's going on. Incredible set design, as always, from FromSoft. This looks absolutely beautiful. In fact, it looks like this cathedral, as this may be the cathedral, it does have very high ceilings, might have been some kind of makeshift hospital. Look at all these white cloths and basins everywhere. Where are all the injured people? I think you know that, so I don't have to say it. They're dead.
Close your eyes and contemplate now the moon, as befits the soon to depart.
That line there. Close your eyes and contemplate now the moon, as befits the soon to be past. So the moon is the thing that is causing everything to die and expire. Whatever's happening, the moon is causing it, and I'm going to assume that we are going to be trying to stop the moon from doing so. And straight into it. Here is the gunplay that's going on and more of the jumping. This, again, must be the cathedral. So what's cool about the jumping and the aerial combat here is that it's not going to just be aerial combat going into a sword swing. We're going to be able to fire guns in mid-air, which is honestly sick.
I pray that you are able, carrier of blood.
I pray that you are able, carrier of blood. Again, marking whoever it was at the beginning out as the player character. We carry the blood that means that we can stop the moon or something like that. This, obviously, a boss of some kind. The fact that there is fire everywhere makes me question if maybe this is going to be one of the environmental effect of Duskbloods. Potentially part of the map gets set on fire at a specific time of day, and that is what summons this boss from the undergrowth. They look incredible. Now I'm going to try and play that in slow motion just to see if this is a werewolf or someone wearing a werewolf cloak. Here we go. It looks like this is the face and this is the helmet, as well as wearing some armor here and here. So I'm going to assume that very similar to Bloodborne, potentially if people ingest too much of the blood, they become corrupted like this person here. Something's going on here. They don't look very well, but a sick medallion and a giant cloak as well. This bit here, let me know what you think in the comments. Either this is an enemy, or maybe this is a way to make your way across the map. As before in Elden Ring, where we had Torrent, so it might be that to make your way quickly across the map, if you don't jump out of a jetpack, you can grab a headless steed, this looks like, and canter it through the streets. I really wish we could get some more of the streets in the Duskbloods trailer, as I want to know what the hell went on. We have a ripped poster here, but honestly, these streets are astonishingly clean, considering it looks like vampires might have been walking up and down them for God knows how long. Now, if I move back here, the reason I think this might be a player character is because they are holding a melee weapon. Now, unfortunately, I can't see whether they have a gun or not, because if they had a gun, I would assume that they're a player character. Also, this is a very long corridor, street. That's what we're supposed to call it when it's outside, isn't it? I need to go outside. It might be that this is an enemy that just acts like a kind of environmental obstacle. Here we have something amazing that I did not see coming. This is, I'm going to assume, one of the powers you can have as a player character. Now, while originally I did think this was some kind of prosthetic leg, I now think this is in fact one of those really long swords, but just look at what happens. You turn into a part dinosaur? That's not even an exaggeration. Like, potentially could call this a giant lizard, but, like, this is a T-Rex head. Come on, surely. Either way, this is absolutely sick. It also looks like you will be able to use this ability to attack and eat enemies, which I'm going to assume is another way to restore the blood that you have, potentially. I mean, why drink from their neck when you can just gulp them down whole? This also looks really similar to the Dragon Breath attack you could use in Elden Ring if you so wished. So I guess maybe this is some kind of wingless dragon, a worm or drake perchance. This person looks exactly like Horaloo to me from Elden Ring. It looks like they're some kind of prisoner who broke free. This is a hangman's noose around their neck, and these are obviously broken shackles, as well as some killer body hair going on here. This, I would assume, is an NPC of some kind. Looks like they're singing. They might be heralding the literal new dawn. Maybe they've broken out of prison because they're a criticizer of the religion or something. They don't look like they have any weapons on them, so I'm going to assume they are not a player character, and instead, like the person in the hat in the sewers, might be an important NPC of some kind. Speaking of, here she is. Oh my god, she looks amazing. This, I cannot tell if this would be an enemy or a player character. If I'm using the logic from before, there's no weapon, there's no gun, and they appear to have an entirely different kind of weapon going on here. Let's have a look. It might be that this is a different player class. Now, this is evidently a mage. I don't think I need to spell that out. Whoever this is moving with some kind of martial prowess. This might be some kind of monk class, perhaps, that only uses melee weapons as opposed to guns. She is doing her stuff in an abandoned train station, and I am the kind of autistic that likes trains, so I want to see way more of this, honestly. This is the mage. I love the mage's abilities. We've got some anti-gravity stuff going on here. Radahn would be so proud. And there's not much more to say about it apart from that. We can see another enemy back here protecting, I'm going to assume this is the Cathedral. And these look like monks of some kind. They're in white gear, which to me suggests some kind of religious order. I'm going to assume that the mages in Duskbloods perhaps take more of a support role. In Elden Ring, you can be a very offensive kind of mage. You can deal damage with your spells. But in a game that is multiplayer, I'm going to assume that mages maybe have more of a restrict offensive spell set. So instead, they are more support for melee characters. I mean, this does look like a damage spell. Having said that, evidently they're going to bring them crashing down into the ground, like so. But also that opens them up to attacks from, you've got to assume, your multiplayer buddies that you're playing Duskbloods with.
tears will flow for one, and one alone.
Interesting. The moon tears will flow for one and one alone. So whatever's going on here with Wee Willie Winkle here, you are trying to be the one who succeeds in having the moon tears flow from you. But that makes me question if perhaps later on in the cycle of Duskbloods, you have to turn on your friends and try and kill each other, and the last one remaining survives or succeeds. I have no idea what's going on with this guy here. They're evidently a mini-boss of some kind. I mean, looking like that, you'd assume they were. Back here, we have the player character we saw at the beginning. This looks more like a church than a cathedral. Perhaps this is the church from this earlier bit of the trailer. This bit here. This helmet looks almost a little bit like Griffith from Guts, to be perfectly honest. But we have embroidered long johns here. And this, a stigmata of some kind. It could be that this is a martyr for the religion that has created the blood that we're ingesting or something like that. Or perhaps they're a fanatic that we need to take on. Their clothing is very austere, so that would make sense. The giant axe, not sure how that fits into being an austere martyr or religious zealot of some kind, but respect the drip. And this bit at the end here is adorable. This is quite a small creature. This is a quill. This is an ink pot, I'm gonna assume. This might be your guide. It looks like some kind of rat, not a mouse. These look like rat ears with an earring and evidently important sigils all around them, and bird wings. Because this is presented in this way, I'm going to assume this creature is some kind of NPC or guide to help you out. It's not presented in a threatening way, so I would assume that this is going to be some kind of aid to your journey. And that is my literal frame-by-frame analysis of the Duskbloods trailer. If you thought this video was useful, then please do like and subscribe to Eurogamer, and if you saw anything in the trailer that I missed, please do point it out in the comments below. I cannot wait for Duskbloods to come out. You can keep an eye on Eurogamer for more videos about Duskbloods from me, Zoe Dillahunty-Light, and as soon as new information gets dropped, you can bet I will cover it. So I will see you lot next time.